Thank you. And Minister, thank you for explaining this section here to me, but it doesn't give me any great comfort. It certainly doesn't give me great comfort. And yes, I did put out a tweet in relation to this, my amendment, which was voted down today. And it was an amendment put down in good faith, because I don't believe that ARA, as you say, will do due diligence with regard to safeguarding potential children born through surrogacy. I mean, it says here, shall not approve under section 53 a surrogacy agreement unless it is satisfied based on the information available. And you said that this regulatory body will have powers. So I'd like you to outline those powers. What are those powers to make sure that the information to protect people who are child sex offenders from becoming surrogate parents? What information will ARA have in relation to that? Because if that individual doesn't make it available to ARA, how can you protect children? So I'd like you to explain that. Thank you. I just want to talk about this. You have to put the child front and centre in this legislation. For me, that is why I put down that amendment. And you talk about setting the bar. The bar is set really, really high when it comes to fostering in this country. And yet, there is failures within that system. I'm very, very sad to say. But an intending foster parent would go through between 6 to 12 months before they would be allowed to have a child in their care. And I've had many children over those years who would have come to my house after being mistreated by foster parents that they were in care with. And that is why I put down that amendment. It was very specific for child sex offenders. If you want to become a foster parent, not only does the intending foster parent have to get Garda clearance, but everybody in your home has to get Garda clearance. So for me, it is to making sure that the regulatory body does conduct due diligence in relation to intending parents. It's not about, it is about setting the bar high. I expect it to be set very high. Doesn't matter. I don't believe it's every right, after seeing what I've seen over the years, that everyone has a right to be a parent. I don't believe that. Children get abused. Children get sexually abused from very, very young ages. So, and I've had many children in my care, including one of my children's foster son, who is gay. And he talked about the time of the referendum. It was his first vote. And he was with me maybe 4 or 5 years at that stage, and he talked about the referendum at the time, and he voted against it at the time. And I couldn't believe he was voting against it. And I said, why would you vote against it? And he said, well, I don't think I would have liked to have been in foster care with two gay men. And I said, why not? He said, because I would never have got to experience what mother love felt like. And they were his words to me. I would never have got to experience what mother love felt like. So
to the section, we're on section 54, if that's
for me, Minister, you know, that is why I included child sexual abuse into that section. That's why I would put the safety of children to the front always when it comes to this legislation. Thank you.
So there's a lot of different things have been raised here. I'll endeavour to go through them. Can I start by just making a point around some of the comments made around the rights or the suitability of 2 men or 2 women to raise a child? People have their own view, and I'm not going to try and dissuade anyone of their views. They are what they are. I just want to say on my behalf, for me, in a personal capacity as Minister for Health and as a member of this government, the government fully believes, and I fully believe, that 1 parent or 2 parents, be they 2 men, 2 women, or a man and a woman, will always do the very best. And some of us as parents will do well. We all struggle as parents. on a weekly basis. And I see no reason why 2 men or 2 women would struggle any more or any less than a man and a woman. I think it comes down to the individual, and I'm not getting into a debate about right and wrong. That's my deeply held view. I have a concern in this debate, which has been articulated by various senators, that what comes out of this may be misrepresented. I think to Senator Siri Carney's reading into the record of Senator Keogan's public statement that this country gets sicker by the day, certainly that for me would not reflect the very reasoned debate and evidence-based debate we had in this room last week and that we're having now, because what it clearly suggests, what I would respectfully suggest that it looks to people like you are trying to do with statements like that, with very emotive, a very powerful statement like that, is to suggest that somehow we are suggesting that because we're not agreeing with your amendment, we think people who are guilty of child sexual abuse could ever avail of surrogacy. That's what it looks like. And I just would ask senators to consider making those kind of statements after this session today in the Seanad. Because I am telling you now, as I told you last week, categorically, nobody guilty of child sexual offences will ever be considered suitable for surrogacy, ever. There is not a single case in which that could ever happen. Senator Mullen suggested, well, why wouldn't we accept the amendment anyway, as an additional safeguard, that there's no downside? But I would put it to you that there is a downside, and I referenced this last week. Imagine someone who is guilty of rape, who is guilty of possession and dissemination of child pornography, who is guilty of a long history of domestic abuse, who is guilty of a long history of violent assault, but not of child sexual abuse. Imagine someone like that who clearly could pose a danger to a child, applies, and they say, well, to the regulatory authority, and they say to the judge, there is only one offence that has been referenced in this legislation. There's only one, and I'm certainly not guilty of that offence. Now, because I am not guilty of that offence, because they have referenced this one offence, clearly that's the only one that is an absolute bar. I guarantee you people will apply and would put that argument to the courts and to the regulatory authority. So what of people guilty of murder? What of people guilty of rape and sexual assault? What of people guilty of possession and dissemination of child pornography? They will never get through a surrogacy application. And the reason they won't get through a surrogacy application is because we have given the regulatory authority very broad powers, and we have specified that the Minister of the day, in specifying the regulations and the information required, they can't just decide, well, it'll be X, Y, or Z, and it'll be none of the important stuff. Section 54, subsection 2C1 says that in determining the information to be specified, this is the Minister, the paramount consideration is the safety of the child. So the Minister is legally obliged to set the criteria in accordance with this and additional safeguards as well. So I've said it before, but based on the conversation we've just had, I want to say it again, and I want to say it categorically. Senator, nobody who would be covered under your proposed amendment would ever get through the door in terms of regulatory, the regulatory authority. And the reason we're not adding in a list, yours, there's obviously others we could add as well, is because we need to keep the ability available to the regulatory authority to say, I don't care if it's X, Y, or Z. I, the regulatory authority, am not satisfied that this child will necessarily be safe. We're not passing the assessment. It could be on a broad range of reasons. So it is to ensure the best possible protection for the safety of the child. And you will do whatever it is you want to do. It is disappointing to hear that that was your public statement afterwards. I don't believe that characterises it. It certainly is entirely contrary to the explanation I gave you, and I'm giving it to you again. And I would just ask you to reflect on whether that's a helpful characterisation. It's certainly one I would disagree with for all of the reasons, the legal reasons I've put forward. It's not an ethical piece here. This is a matter of law. Due diligence is part of the bill. That was asked. Much of what is in this bill is based on adoption law and regulations and background checks in adoption. A question was asked about refusal to comply with the information. So a refusal to comply with the information constitutes a barrier to completing a safety assessment of the child. And if the regulatory authority cannot complete a safety assessment of the child, they cannot and would not grant an order. Senator Ruan made the point that there may be people who are carrying offences, say a minor drugs possession charge from years ago. She made the point that there could be prejudicial assessment against people from lower income families, from lower income communities. And this is exactly why we are giving the regulatory authority the powers to assess on a case-by-case basis. But they are assessing based on criteria specified in law, in statutory instrument, by the Minister, and the Minister must make those regulations in accordance with consideration, the paramount consideration being the safety of the child. So there are layers of protections in place, and I believe they are in place regardless of household income. Senator Ruan also, I think, made a very fair point around access to fertility. There's been a lot of talk about surrogacy being provided in lower income countries. Senator Ruan flips that on its head and says, what about lower income men or women who want to avail of surrogacy, or indeed avail of other fertility? And I know the Senator is no longer here, but the entire direction of travel in terms of fertility services being rolled out by this government is to make them affordable to everybody. It's why I have rolled out state-funded IVF for the first time. And through this bill, we'll be able to expand that IVF to donor-assisted IVF, which in the main will help same-sex female couples, but also male-female couples as well. It's why we have massively expanded access to GP services, which is the first port of call for anybody with fertility questions. It's why we have set up 6 regional fertility clinics around the country, which are completely free for every person in this country to use. So in the lifetime of this government, we have created 3 tiers of fertility services, most of which are completely free for everybody, and all of which are completely free for lower income households as well. And Senator O'Hara raised the point, and Chair, I might just beg your indulgence for 2 seconds, just in case we don't get back to this, because I was talking to some parents just last night on the bill, and there is a question. They have a very real concern. So if you would indulge me for even 1 minute, a question was raised. If we have had our child through surrogacy outside of Ireland, will my child be able to avail of Irish citizenship? And the answer is yes. Not in the drafting of this bill. We got a very clear position from the initial drafter saying it wasn't possible. Between Minister McEntee and myself, we have pushed back very hard on that, and we have said, I'm sorry, but if your parent is Irish and you've had your child in Canada or England or Australia or Nairobi or wherever it may be, whatever rules apply, if you gave birth to that child yourself, or if you were the dad of that child yourself, whatever through a heterosexual couple, or through the woman giving birth to the child, whatever rights would apply to that child in terms of citizenship, we will make sure that your child gets them as well. So it's an undertaking I'm very happy to give publicly here. It's in the amending legislation. It has taken a lot of work legally to get us all around to a point where we have been able to achieve this. But from my perspective, it is absolutely essential, and that is being drafted right now. And thank you for your indulgence on that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Senator